Have you ever found yourself overthinking during social situations? Because I can't lie, I used to have this tendency to overanalyze everything, from my posture to what I should be doing with my hands, to how long I should be holding eye contact for without making things weird. And whilst I'm rationalizing all of that in my own head, I realized that I also need to think about what I'm going to be saying next, whilst also actively listening to the other person, without letting that awkward silence set in and ruin the vibe. It's like this type of overthinking neurosis that started at a very young age, when I would use my own imagination to curb the boredom, as I was an only child and I would be in solitude a lot of the time. And even as I've gotten older, I've grown so used to constantly zoning in and out of overthinking about so many different situations. From where I'm going to be in the next 10 years to what if I optimize this aspect of my life this way, whether that's training or success. It's to the point where I know this might sound a little bit weird, but it's like there's various tapes playing in the back of my mind and I can personally just zone out temporarily from real life and play through those. By the way, I know this is going a little bit off topic, but isn't it cool that we've all got a second voice in our own minds that nobody else can hear but yourself? Well, those voices in our minds have the capacity to create models, or different versions of the models of both the individual as well as the outside world around us. And this gives us a good level of control and predictability, so that we're able to better respond to the changes in the exterior world. It's a bit like living in a simulation. I mean, just think about it. Even before anything happens in the real world, our minds are going through imaginary situations where we can envision how our actions now can affect our future. And to put this all into context, let me give you an example. So imagine in the next 10 minutes, you were forced to go up on stage and talk in front of thousands of people about something you were genuinely passionate about for the next 10 minutes. What would be the first few thoughts that would be racing through your mind? Maybe you would be like me, who'd be sat there like a lost potato, just hoping to God that you don't just blank out in the middle of the stage, because that'd be quite embarrassing, right? Or you're thinking about how the people closest to you would be reacting to your speech, because there is a possibility that they may actually treat you differently after the speech. And depending on how confident or unconfident you feel about public speaking, you may be all too familiar with the feeling of your heart pounding through your chest. You may even start to view yourself talking on stage from the viewpoint of another person in the audience, so that you can envision what you may look like in front of other people. And by the way, don't worry if this all sounds like you, because if I was in that same situation, I would also probably be bricking it as well. Now I want you to take a nostalgia trip and think back to your childhood. What do you remember? I know for myself, it was playing football during lunchtimes, just being able to have the freedom to mess around during lessons and being able to hop on PlayStation after school with my mates. And hopefully, like myself, you also have a somewhat positive feeling towards your childhood. But there may be certain childhood memories that you may have buried at the back of your mind, as these types of thoughts and memories bring up feelings of guilt, shame and regret. And in some cases, you may undergo a thing called rumination, which is essentially where you engage in a thought or a set of thoughts over and over again without any sort of resolution. I know for myself, I would end up catching myself in the shower just contemplating the past, whether that's me replaying some sort of argument that happened ages ago over and over again and thinking about how things would be different if I responded this way, or cringing at myself for saying or acting in a particular way which was way out of order, and it's something I would never do today. And in some cases, this could lead to you living in the past and not being able to let go of your past identity, which could lead to you going into this depressive spiral. And from what I've described so far, it seems like our voice seems more like a liability, doesn't it? I mean, the question that we truly have to be asking ourselves is, number one, how, and number two, why we have the ability to talk to ourselves in the first place. And the answer to that question is that this sort of mental time travel that we all engage in at some point in our lives has actually been a very valuable asset in human existence. And in fact, it's a human tendency to conceptualize the memories that we've collected throughout our lives. It's a bit like a fantasy novel in which we're narrating the life that we're living in right now. It's even helpful during times where you provide yourself with a little bit of positive self-talk as a source of motivation. It's even helpful during times where you can provide yourself with positive self-talk as a source of motivation. And I know if you're a student watching this, or you have been a student who's tried to do an assignment last minute, you've probably talked to yourself in either second or third person just a little bit longer, and then when you're done you can finally relax. Even the way you view the world right now, along with your belief system, is primarily shaped by the environment that you were brought up in. And over time, we subconsciously soak in and interpret the different learning lessons that we learn through just simply living life. And in turn, these thoughts become the foundation of our internal monologue. And this is usually displayed really well in certain animes or movies, where the viewer can get an understanding of a character's intentions thought processes and the reasons as to why they're doing a certain action, whether they were in the pursuit of money or power, for instance. In fact, there was a study done which basically found out that our inner experiences constantly dwarfs our outer experiences, which correlates to how happy the participants in the study were. You may even think back to a time where you know you should be happy in the moment, whether that's you spending time with family or friends. But for whatever reason, your mind is zoned out and thinking about something completely different. And in some cases, people may encourage you to talk about what is going up inside that head of yours. And you're probably also familiar with the "you need to open up more" statement, which is popularized heavily in the Western culture. And even though I do agree that this is coming from a place of empathy and care, I just feel like, depending on the context, it just may not be as simple as it sounds. Because usually the first thing that we look for when we project our inner voice is a fulfillment of our emotional needs. And as a result, we tend to over-focus on receiving empathy rather than practical solutions. And this is especially true when it comes to romantic relationships. And this may be going a bit off topic, but there may have been times in your life where you may have planned or even fantasized about someone from the opposite gender and how you're going to build this life in the future, whilst also only just exchanging a couple of words. In fact, you may have even started to overthink so much so that you've created this ideal image of this other person based on the preconceived notions of the information that you've got, despite not really knowing them at all. Because I'm like 99% sure that what I've just described there is super relatable, because this used to be me when I was a lot younger. And I know this has happened to me interacting with other girls as they thought this about me as well, even though they didn't have to say anything explicitly. You know when you just know. And I know some people may call this as having a crush on someone, but I'm also talking about this unhealthy level of overthinking that you go through, despite not getting the reciprocation that you should be getting in terms of time and energy. It's just crazy to me how much our inner voices can take over, and we can get stuck in our own minds rather than living real life. I guess the best way to describe how our minds function is it's a bit like a lens in which we've got our inner voices which control how much we want to zoom in or out of a particular thought. And in most cases, the negative inner voice usually occurs when we zoom in super close into a particular thought pattern, which triggers our adrenaline and cortisol levels, which makes it so that we lose the perspective at hand. And of course, the more we consciously engage in these thoughts, the more we go down this negative downward spiral, which makes it harder to climb back out. But our brains have also evolved to zoom out and gain a broader perspective on things. And we do this by adding distance psychologically, by using our thoughts to change the initial streams of thought. I know it's a bit strange, but I'll give you an example to make things a lot easier to understand. So just for context, I've graduated from university. But when I just step back and actually think, in the grand scheme of things, this degree or paper is merely a stepping stone to the next stage of my life, which is the working world. And we're all gonna pass away anyway, so what is the point? The issue here is that I've essentially stolen joy from that very moment, when in fact I should be celebrating the fact that I've just graduated. And this is basically nihilism 101. But the thing is, this whole idea and process of zooming out can low-key be a benefit in some cases, because it reduces the amount of intrusive thinking that we do, which weakens the emotional attachment that we have for a certain memory or thought pattern. We can almost use our past and present experiences that we've collected in our minds as almost a case study for one thing, which is wisdom. And the way I would personally define wisdom would be using the mind to practically reason for a set of problems, which usually involves some sort of uncertainty. And your mind would take into account of all the different variables, from recognizing the limits of your own knowledge to how things may unfold over time, whilst acknowledging other people's opinions and playing devil's advocate. Essentially, we're trying to create order in our minds amongst the chaos, which is the outer world. And this comes into the topic of understanding the pivotal role on how the perception of control plays in our lives. So even though this video was more so about understanding the psychology behind as to the reasons as to why we overthink, I'm also going to give you 3 solutions that you can take away from this video on how to actually control this overthinking habit. And it's something which has helped me in my personal life. And the first one is going through and actually committing to a consistent routine. And this means having a fixed sequence of behaviors which has a purpose. And this should provide you with a sense of order and control, which is super helpful when you're experiencing those internal monologues. Although many of the routines we engage in would be in the physical sense, such as working out, socializing with others, and just touching grass. You can even engage in a routine in a more spiritual sense, such as being fully present in a conversation with your loved ones, or even meditation, or going to a place of worship once a week. Now, the second way to control your overthinking is to zoom out and time travel. Now, think about a situation that you're going through right now, and compare that to a life event that has happened to you in the past. something that you may have not have given yourself enough credit for. And now think about how these fit into the broader schemes of your life, and how you'd be feeling, say, in a month or a year from now. Now, the final way to control your overthinking is to view yourself as a third person rather than a first person. This is honestly one of the best pieces of advice that I've used in my own life, where I would take an objective look at a particular situation that I've taken on a more personal level. One example I can share in my own life was when I was younger, there would always be this guy who would be constantly disrespecting me, and I would build up this level of anger and resentment in myself, as I saw myself as the victim. However, as soon as I saw the situation in third person, all of a sudden I've realized that the real victim was him. Because for someone to go into great lengths to try and disrespect someone is obviously unsatisfied with their own life. I appreciate you watching the video, and feel free to check out the videos on screen if you're interested.